Without a doubt, the most frequent question Old North's educators get from visitors is something along the lines of, what is the deal with the weird seating here? These are called box pews, and if you lived in the 1700s, the seating style would have been pretty unremarkable, though today box pews are relatively rare. That makes them look a little bizarre compared to what people are expecting to see in a church. Most churches removed box pews over time to open up more seating, but this seating arrangement offered a few benefits as well. And even the history of the most ordinary things, like church seating, can offer interesting insights into history. So from the church's standpoint, box pews were a way to raise funds. Pews actually had to be purchased here all the way up until 1912, and these boxed-in units are an organized way to sell them. Churches and ministers require funds, and money for the building, church staff, and services had to come from somewhere, so selling pew space was one way to do that. From the individual member's point of view, box pews had benefits as well. Tall walls and enclosed space offer better insulation during winter services. Pew owners now also had a guaranteed seat within the church. And since you literally bought the pew, that meant you owned it and could customize it as you wanted as well, decorating the inside, adding more comfortable seating, for example. Buying a pew also gave you a vote in all church business. Owning a box pew made you a church proprietor, or in a sense, a part owner of the church. So that's the why of box pews, but what I find even more interesting is how much these pews would have cost. You might have thought that for once there would be a simple answer, but alas, not so much. Their system was surprisingly complicated. So let's ignore that the question forgets the changes in price that would have taken place over 300 years, and also ignore the changes from pounds to dollars after independence, and focus on just the earliest years of the church. A pew on the ground floor at that time cost about 30 pounds, while a pew in the gallery was slightly cheaper at 25 pounds. But even that answer varies. That was simply the initial price to buy a pew. Like buying a car or house today, there were significant expenses beyond the initial purchase. Each pew owner had to pay a yearly tax, as well as regular weekly contributions, which was basically like passing the plate around today. Except, if you fell behind on these contributions, the church reserved the right to take your pew back and sell it to someone else. All told, it is hard to quantify how much a pew actually cost. There were also plenty of exceptions. If a pew was sold midway through the year, that also changed the price, because as everyone knows, a new pew loses value the moment you drive it off the lot. Rarely, some were even able to negotiate knocking a few pounds off the price. For instance, one person arguing that their pew was behind a pillar and it blocked their view. Sometimes pews were cheaper if you worked for the church as well. The cost of a pew was surprisingly complicated, and I haven't even begun to get into the complications around how currency and credit worked in the colonies. But just the standard 30 pounds alone was well beyond what the average person could afford in the 1720s. Adding in the extra costs meant that in Old North's early years, this was a church designed for the wealthy. If you could not afford a pew, there were free seats and standing room available, but you lost your vote in church business and also would struggle to see or participate in church services. Essentially, you became a second-class congregant. Boston was still a hierarchical society at this time, and Old North's arrangement would not have been even that noteworthy. Most visitors today are surprised by this system. They object to the idea of a church treating the wealthiest members preferentially. Old North did eventually lower the cost and became less exclusive over time, but I think we often take it for granted how much the revolution has altered our ways of thinking. Change didn't always happen overnight. Old North itself still sold pews up until the early 1900s, but change nonetheless happened. And I think often it's the simplest concepts, like the history of seating in a church, that help us see these changes in action.